to go ahead and get started with our last session of the day. I hope all of you have enjoyed the prior sessions as much as I have. They've been wonderful. I have to admit, the food wasn't too bad either, I thought. So what a wonderful day. Yeah, how about that? I especially want to thank Lila Neely, who put together a lot of this. I will say Lila's had the difficulty of working with me. She'll occasionally say things like, what did you think about the centerpiece? And I'd say I didn't even know we had a centerpiece. But she always does a wonderful job, as does Ashley Jones, who's here, and Dr. Ann Canty. Let's give them a round of applause. Special thanks to Liz Randall as well for doing so much for us today. So we're going to move right ahead, and we've got with us two wonderful friends of the Ole Miss School of Business and the university as well, and that is Mike Glenn and Mike Ducker. Mike Glenn has done almost everything at FedEx, I would argue. He's been an incredible leader there. His current title is, I'm trying to see it, Executive Vice President of Market Development and Corporate Communications. So that big, long title. One time in the past, I actually had a golf video of him at the 2011 Pebble Beach Pro-Am, but I told him I wouldn't mention that, so I'm not going to do that again today. So we don't want to embarrass him with that, but he will tell you about his journey from the University of Mississippi to a leader at FedEx. Mike Ducker, by the same token, has literally been all over the world, including places like China, for example. And I think I'm a little bit envious. He said he's going to retire soon, and then he's going to come back and do things more often like this. At least that's what I told him. I told him the pay was great because we won't bump him up into any new tax bracket with our pay scale here. So, but please welcome Mike Glenn and Mike Ducker.
In the afternoon, yeah.
Let me tell you how happy we are to be here. As a 1977 graduate of the university, it's always a thrill for me to be able to come back and spend time on campus. And I look for any opportunities that the dean knows to visit the university and are here often. I just do want to take 1 second to recognize my business partner here. We're not going to sit down.
No, I was just standing in the background there, man.
One of the biggest thrills for me personally was several years ago. I was invited, I wasn't invited, I was told I was being inducted into the Ole Miss Hall of Fame. And it was a thrill for me, and it was probably the highlight of my personal life, in addition to my marriage and my kids. Make sure we got those in the right priority. But I'm also proud of my business partner. So at the Tennessee game this weekend, he will be going into the Ole Miss Hall of Fame.
Thank you, man.
So what we're going to do today, if it's okay, is I really wanted to spend a little time, tell you a little bit about FedEx. Not a lot. I'm sure most of you know quite a bit about the company. If you don't, I'd be happy to talk about that. Tell you a little bit about the career journeys that we've been on. We've taken two very different paths through the organization. Perhaps give a few thoughts about, gee, if I could rewind the clock, what would I do differently? If I could come up with 2 or 3 things that if I could just go back to the MBA program, what would I really think about today that I didn't think about then? And then we did this a couple years ago, and the most popular part of it was actually hearing from you, hearing your questions. So we're going to spend a little time answering some questions. But let me start out by saying how envious I am of you getting your MBA from Ole Miss. I graduated from Ole Miss in 77. I went to work for a company. Made the decision that there was one way that I could separate myself from everybody else when an MBA wasn't so popular.
Pull her up.
I'm sorry, that's not my mic.
Okay.
Okay. We good? We good? Thanks. So I had an opportunity to go back at that time to Memphis State University. I was working during the day, going to school at night, and it was a terrific opportunity for me. But I missed much of the experience that you have today of being a full-time student. Now, there are pros and cons to that, I will tell you. The biggest pro for me is I met a woman that worked for FedEx, and so she hired me. So that was the biggest pro. But it was a much different experience. There were no cell phones, no laptops, no iPads. All we had was a pencil and piece of paper, and the learning experience was much different than it is today. FedEx was also a much different company at that time. That was 1981 when I joined. You joined in
75.
75. What was the volume at that time?
I can remember it as low as 2,000 pieces a night. 2,000
pieces a night. When I joined the company, we were handling about 150,000 packages a day. Revenue was about $750 million at that time. Today, the company, last fiscal year, was $45 billion. We handle over 10 million packages a day. This peak season, we'll handle almost 25 million packages in a single day. So things have changed a little bit. When I first joined, we weren't even in the international business. Mike has blazed the trail, and we serve 220 countries around the world. If we don't go there, they don't want us. So that's pretty much the situation, and Mike's been in almost every one of them. So the company's changed a lot. The first night of operations back in 1973, there were 6 or 7 packages, and they were sorted on a table about the size that you're sitting at right now. Today, we have hubs all over the world, major facilities to support the operation. The old concept of every package coming to Memphis is long past, thank goodness. And the company's changed a lot. We operate 650 airplanes, over 100,000 vehicles, operations all over the world. But the one thing that's constant in the company is the company's culture and its philosophy, which is people, service, profit. And our belief has always been, if you take care of your team members, and by that provide them enriched learning experiences, opportunities to grow, treat them fairly, make sure they're the first consideration in any decision that you make, they will then in turn provide the service that you need to deliver the returns for the shareholder and then invest back into the company and into the team members. That's been our philosophy since day one. Our purpose is connecting people and possibilities around the world. Today, understanding the purpose, why you go to work every day, is much more important. And our team members know that that's what we're trying to do, connect people and possibilities all around the world. I'm going to ask Mike just to give you a little bit of background on his career and his walk through FedEx, and I'll do the same, and then we'll talk about a few other issues.
Well, like Mike, it's great to be here with you today. My journey through Ole Miss was a little bit different. I signed a football scholarship in '73 to play here. A series of knee operations ended that prematurely.
Who were you going against?
Well, my claim to fame was trying to block Ben Williams. And I put the emphasis on trying, you know. And I can remember one time we were playing LSU, and they had a really big boy playing on me who sacked the quarterback a couple times, had him running all game, and I finally went back to the huddle, and he said, "Damn, Duck, could you just lay down in front of him?" And I said, "I tried that. Have you got any other bright ideas?" I mean, you know. But after a couple of years here, I left, signed my scholarship back, and then went to work for a while, and I decided that wasn't going to be a great deal. If I really wanted to do something with my future career, I needed to go back to school. Went back to the University of Memphis. At that point in time, Memphis State University. And then in 1975, I was sort of between semesters, needed a job, and one of my roommates said, "Well, there's this little company called Federal Express. Why don't you try those guys?" Well, at that point in time, we had about 3,000 employees, I think, when I first joined the company. We weren't making any money. And so I went for my job interview, and they said, "Well, what are your hobbies?" And I said, "Well, I lift weights, run, do things like that." They said, "Well, when can you report for work? Would tonight be too soon?" "No, it's not too soon." So they sent you for a little physical. I started working the hub in 1975, $2.81 an hour. Didn't think that was a lot of money back then, but it was enough to get you by. And little did I know that the things Mike talked about, the culture, the philosophies, and the raw energy that existed at that point in time would develop into what today is arguably one of the world's iconic brands, thanks to Mike's great leadership and care of the brand over the years. And it's arguably one of the world's top companies. And so for the last 39, soon to be 40 years, that's what I've been doing. And I got my MBA from the Kellogg School at Northwestern on an executive program. And I was pretty late in life with that when I finished it up in 1999. So that gives you an idea. And I'm 61, so you can do the math. And as the dean said, at the end of this year, after that 40 years, I'm going to hang them up for FedEx. I've been doing it for a long time and going to pursue some other things right now. So I'm in the process of transitioning my role to a guy that's been working with me for about the past 18 years. So that's a little bit about my history, but I like Mike. Ole Miss has been a highlight for me, even though I didn't get to spend near as much time here as Mike did. But I cherish the time that I spent here, and I encourage you to don't be looking too far in the future. Enjoy the time that you're here right now, because these are some of the best times of your life. It gets a lot harder after this, I'll promise you that. So enjoy the time. And I don't know if you want me to go into what I do today,
Well,
or we want to break.
I'll
break
tell
it
you a
in
little bit about my career journey, and then
Yeah.
I'll let Mike kind of
Yeah.
go back and say, what if we could rewind the clock? And then maybe that'll stimulate some questions that you have. As I mentioned, I joined the company in 1981. I joined the company as a senior development specialist in the sales administration area. And my responsibilities back that time were competitive intelligence and sales training. I mean, hard to think about that in 1981, the company never had a sales orientation program, and I had the opportunity to do that, which was a great experience for me because it let me meet a lot of people in the company as we developed that program. I was a marketing major at Ole Miss. My concentration in the MBA program was marketing, and so I always aspired to move into marketing. I had the opportunity to do that. After a short stint in the pricing organization, I took over one of our services. We had product marketing structure at the time. And the great part about the company at that time is it was moving and growing so fast that, and much like today even, if you don't like what you're doing at FedEx today, hang around, it'll be different tomorrow. And so that was much like my career. I moved out of a product management structure into the director of U.S. marketing, and then I went to become an officer of marketing. I had responsibility for customer service. I'll tell you a funny story. I got promoted to vice president, which means you're an officer of the company, when I was 29 years old. I was the youngest in the company at the time, and I was so excited. I was so excited because, you know, I knew I had aspired on I always operated off a 5-year plan. Everything was on a 5-year plan. In 5 years, I want to be here. Another 5 years, I want to be there. I had my whole career mapped out. Well, it kind of got destroyed when I got promoted, and I was so excited, and I got a phone call from our founder and chairman, Fred Smith, and he can be pretty direct. He said, Glenn, he says, congratulations on your promotion. And I said, well, thank you, sir. I'm thrilled you have this much confidence in me. He says, I just got to tell you one thing. We promoted you on potential. And I sat there and I said,
I think that's good.
okay. And so all this, I was walking around with my chest out. I was so excited. And then he said, we promoted you on potential. Don't let me down. And so it was really one of these things like a balloon. You know, you pop the balloon and it kind of goes, and I went straight down from there. But, boy, he brought me down to the ground in a hurry, which also let me know that if I was promoted on potential, if I didn't fulfill that potential, I wouldn't be around very long. That was a nice way of him saying that. Then we had the opportunity to do some different things, and I just moved around in the organization and finally landed where I am today in about 1999. And my title is kind of strange, but for all intents and purposes, I have responsibility for sales, marketing, customer service, public relations, investor relations, our retail strategy, which is our FedEx Office retail outlets, and some other sports marketing and some other things like that. So.
The brand.
Which we can talk about if you'd like. I mean, I think there are two types of brands that you need to be thinking about: the brand that you represent here at Ole Miss, and then your personal brand. But it's been a great ride for me. I've had the opportunity, just like Mike, to leave FedEx several times to go to work for several great companies. And both of us have always made the same decision to stay, and there's one reason for that, and that is the whole people, service, profit philosophy at FedEx. Culture is important, and the culture of any organization, every organization has a culture. And the culture, Ole Miss has a culture. We all know that. Every organization has a culture. Your church has a culture. Your fraternity or sorority has a culture. Every organization has a culture. And that culture is extremely important. Matter of fact, Peter Drucker, who you may have heard of, I'm sure you have, is quoted as saying, "Culture eats strategy for lunch." FedEx has an extremely strong culture. And we work hard to manage that culture just as we would any other strategic program in the company. Because if you ever reach a point where your team members don't wake up every day and get excited about going to work, you've lost your culture. And if the students at Ole Miss ever wake up and say, "I'm not really interested," I know you have some bad nights and long studies, and sometimes it's not so exciting about getting up and going to class. But if you ever get to the point where you don't enjoy the experience, Ole Miss has lost its culture. So that's extremely important. It's extremely important to both of us. We spend a lot of time managing that, and it's been a great ride. Clearly, we'll be sad to see Mike go over the side, as we say, but his footprints will be around there for a long time. Now, what I'd like to do is just maybe spend a few minutes talking about, if we could rewind the clock, what would we do differently? What would we think about that we weren't thinking about then when we were both sitting in your shoes? And then with that, we can do some Q&A, and I'd like to hear what's on your mind.
Yeah. Well, a few things. I'll give you a few highlights in terms of the movements that I had. I mean, I like Mike, moved pretty smartly through the organization, and I had it all mapped out too. Didn't work the way that I'd planned it, and at one point in time they said, "Well, look, we're going to make you an officer of the company, but we'd like you to go into the international business." And I said, "Okay, great." They said, "We got 4 jobs. One of them's in the UK, one of them's in Paris, one of them's in Frankfurt, and one of them's in Milan, Italy." And they said, "Why don't you tell us in order of preference what you like?" I said, "Well, number 1, the UK. That'd be easy. Language is easy to get into." I said, "Number 2 is German. Took some German in college. So Frankfurt would be a good second choice." And I said, "A good third choice would be Paris. Who doesn't want to go to Paris?" I said, "A good fourth choice would be Milan for me. Any of those will work, but that's my order of preference." They called me 2 weeks later and said, "We want to offer you the job in Milan." I said, "Well, who are the other 3 guys?" Because darn, they must be really good. But anyway, I mean, and the first time I flew into Italy, I was running the place. And so it was a great experience for me. Didn't speak a word of Italian. And in fact, yesterday I called my assistant, the one that I had when I first got there. She had just celebrated 25 years with the company. She took me in like a brother or something. I mean, I was eating dinner out with the Italians every night, learning the language, having a lot of fun. Did that for a few months. Then Mike and I had to restructure an entire business. And at the end of that restructuring, I was out of the job. And the chairman called and said, "Don't worry about it. I'm sending you to Hong Kong." I said, "Well, could I go see that first, just before I say yeah to that?" "Sure, go over there." So I went to Singapore, fell in love with that, ran Singapore, ran the South Pacific Middle East region for about 4.5 years. The territory went from Cairo to Guam. And then after that was promoted to the Asia division. I ran that for a time, about 5 years. That was based in Hong Kong. And then came back, where I've been running as the chief operating officer of the company for the past 14 years or so. So that's a little bit about my background. What would I think about differently if I were sitting in your shoes today? There are 3 big things for me. I was thinking about this on the way down when Mike posited the question. One of them would be, for me, you guys spend a lot of time probably working on strategy. And the one thing that I would work on is how do you execute that stuff? Because we spend far too little time thinking about how hard this is going to be to do, and we spend a lot of time putting it down on paper, you know. The second thing that I'd spend a lot of time on is how do you sell this idea? Because we really go through all the analytics, look at everything, and I can tell you this, in the business world that we live in, and I don't know about Mike, but since I got out of MBA school, I haven't done one regression analysis. Now, how many of you can say that? How many are you doing of those things? I haven't done one of them since you got out. So the real important thing is you do all the analytics, you come to a conclusion. How do you sell that idea to the upper management that you're trying to influence? And the third thing that I would spend time on is organization and culture, as Mike said. The reason we're still here is because we're passionate about this thing, even after 30 plus years. We're in a good business. It's clean, ethical. Nobody asks you to do anything illegal, immoral. It's a great place to work. And that doesn't happen by accident. And I would spend a whole lot more time thinking about that as a student at your level. And where do you want to go to work? What do you want to be known for? And what do you want your position to be in the world? And you want it to be with an organization, if there is one, that's got that kind of culture and passion. And if you're going to create your own organization as an entrepreneur, you need to spend a heck of a lot of time thinking about what kind of organization you want. So those are the three things I'd think more about.
From my perspective, looking back, I will tell you on the front end that I always regretted not staying at Ole Miss and going through the MBA program. As it turned out, that was probably a good thing for me. I got out of school, I went to work, I worked for a couple of years. I realized that one thing I wish I'd have done is paid more attention to undergraduate school. When I gave my speech at the Hall of Fame dinner, Chancellor Kayat was there, and I announced to Chancellor Kayat and the whole audience, which was much bigger than this one, that I was academically dismissed from the university after my first semester here. He cringed and thought, what a mistake have we made? And so, I was in pre-pharmacy school, I was in the wrong thing, and it just didn't work for me. I had a lot of confidence. I thought, I don't care whether it's pre-med, pre-pharmacy, engineering, whatever. If I apply myself, I can do it. Now, a lot of you probably think that the reason I was academically dismissed is because I spent a lot of time at a place somewhat like the library downtown, which at my day it was the Gin. Some of you around the room may remember the Gin. It was equally attractive in terms of time, a place to spend your spare time, but that actually was not the case. I learned a very valuable lesson is that no matter how hard you try, sometimes you're just not cut out to do certain things. And so that in and of itself was a very valuable thing for me. The other thing I learned after spending a couple of years in the workplace is that I was like everybody else. I was just like everybody else. I wasn't differentiated in any way, shape, or form. There were a lot of people working for Dover Elevator Company, which was the place I went to work for. And on that note, let me just add one other small point. When you have an opportunity to interview here on campus, interview. I don't care whether you're interested in the job or not. That's great practice. Because the one thing I see today with people is they do not know how to interview. They don't know how to sell themselves. And that gets to my first piece of advice is the importance of understanding your personal brand. If you know who you are, if you know your strengths and relative weaknesses, develop that. Your appearance, how you dress, how you carry yourself. Interestingly enough, one of the biggest issues we have with undergraduates coming into FedEx today, not graduates, undergraduates, we have to teach them how to dress. They're accustomed to going around campus and baggy jeans, and we have a casual dress policy. But I can promise you there are different definitions of casual. And we literally have to teach people how to dress. Well, what does that say? That says you're not totally clear about your personal brand, how you communicate, how you carry yourself. That's a critical issue. So, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about that, but I would strongly encourage you to really think about your personal brand, how you want to be perceived when you go into an interview. And it's going to take some work. Everybody doesn't get interviewing right off the bat. So take advantage of the opportunities that the university provides you to practice selling yourself, to practice honing your own personal brand. That's number one. Number two, I really wish I would have understood the importance of a good financial background. I always, after I got out of pre-pharmacy, or after the university got me out of pre-pharmacy, at that point I was very clear on what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in marketing. I thought marketing was fun. I loved the classes. Dr. Perry at the time helped me understand I had no place in accounting, so I really enjoyed it. And so, but what I didn't, and then when I went into graduate school, everything I did, I was steering it towards the marketing, and I really tried to avoid as much of the financial part of the program, and there was a lot more selection back then than today. Then I got into the workplace, and as I moved through the organization, what I found is every battle that I fought, I was fighting with somebody in the finance organization. Because marketing people, by definition, I always say the good definition of a marketing person is somebody that has the courage to make the rest of the organization uncomfortable. Because you're advocating on behalf of the customer. You're seeking to create new value. Well, those things don't always go well in a large organization. Organizations tend to get conservative. So, not surprisingly, when you're fostering those ideas, when you're working with your team to come up with those types of things, you end up running into two organizations. One is the legal department, not surprisingly. Any attorneys in the room? Sorry, Steve. The other is the finance organization.
Can't believe they admitted it.
And the argument you get into, which finance loves, is they love to get into a room with a marketing person that doesn't know how to argue the return on investment of a particular program. And so I learned very painfully that I was not equipped to win those arguments until I developed the necessary skills. You've got a great opportunity to hone your business financial skills. I'm not talking about how to trade bonds and stocks and all those kinds of things. I'm talking about how to read a balance sheet. I'm talking about how to develop a model that says, here's what the return on investment is going to be. Here's the hurdle rate, we're going to hit it, and so on and so forth. So develop those skills. And then the last area I would tell you is, jokingly, I call the area of learning how to play well with others. And when I was going through the MBA program, because I was going through at night at the University of Memphis, you know, I used to get up in the morning. I had a sales territory that went all the way down to Hattiesburg. I mean, the worst day of my life is having to make sales calls on the campus of the University of Southern Mississippi. But I would get up, and I'd go down there. I'd start there, and I'd start working my way back. I'd stop into Columbus. And I also had Mississippi State, by the way. To their credit, they treated this alumnus very well down there. They bought what I had to sell. And then I would come back through Tupelo, then I'd make a stop in Oxford, which was great, because I had this account too, and then I'd get back in Memphis in time to go to class at night. But the program was much different back then. You went to class, you did your work, you go back to class, you do your work, and there was very little interaction with my peers. And it really didn't develop the skills required to learn how to work on a team. And one of the things that we do with our internship program is we put everybody that goes through the internship program on a team. Because whatever you do, whenever you go into an organization like FedEx, you're not going to do it on your own. You're going to do it. You're going to be depending upon the next person. And the reality is that next person's looking at you saying, is this the type person that I want to be in the foxhole with? Is this the person that I have confidence in that's going to go to battle with me, that the first time something goes bad is not going to hang me out to dry? Learn how to be a good teammate. I'm sure if Coach Freeze was here today, he would be telling you exactly the same message, but he would be telling to you that he tells that message to the football team. You got the same issues. You got the same exact issues. From the time you start, you're going to be involved in team activities. You're going to be involved in working, develop solutions as a team. So I know you do a lot of that. Take that seriously. Make sure that you're the type person that when the survey is done about who participated, who was a good teammate, that you're the good teammate. Also take advantage of opportunities to lead among peers. Not every situation is a leadership opportunity for everybody. One of the greatest programs, Mike went through this too, and I went through, is a program called Exploring Leadership, which was modeled after Outward Bound, and it was one of the most important lessons that I learned. And that different people become leaders in different situations, and it was all about testing your physical and mental abilities and abilities to work with a team. And we had one guy on the team, was a great guy, Mike knows him, doesn't work for the company anymore, but he was a quiet guy, big guy, former football player, and for the first 3 days, he didn't say anything. He was a good, solid teammate, made his contributions, but never really stepped out, took any risk or anything. So the last day, they took us out about 10 miles, and they left us with a map. And they said, get back. Well, I didn't know how to read the map, and I wasn't navigating the compass very well. Nobody else on the team was either. Then all of a sudden, this quiet guy, big guy, steps forward and says, well, if we start heading in this direction, by my calculations, in about how many hours we'll be back. And immediately, everybody recognized this guy has tremendous value as a teammate. He just leads in a different way. So no matter what your makeup is, you're going to have opportunities to be a leader. Take advantage of those peer leadership opportunities. I can promise you, when people are hiring into management roles, they're going to look at your leadership ability at the peer leader, because there's one fact that has never failed. Past performance is the best predictor of future behavior. So if people see you as a leader among your peers, as a good teammate, they're willing to overlook a lot of things. You may not be the smartest person on the team. You may not have the same set of skills from an analytical perspective or whatever, but if they see you as a good teammate, somebody that has the ability to motivate a group of people, a diverse group of people to achieve a common goal, it's my definition of leadership, ability to motivate a diverse group of people to achieve a common goal. If you have that ability, you got tons of potential. They're hard to find. So hone those skills, learn how to play well with others, and take advantage of the opportunities you have here while you're going through the MBA program. And finally, I'll close with this. I know a lot of you have gone straight out of a 4-year undergraduate degree into graduate school. If you have opportunities to work with internships or whatever, I strongly encourage that. It will shape your learning experience in the program. Because what you will see and what you will, how many of you have been through internships already? Okay, I think you would agree with me. What you see in the real world, assuming you had an internship that is beyond managing the birthday list. Now, let's be honest, there are internships where you're said, here's the birthday list, get the letters out, and manage the birthday list. FedEx doesn't do internships that way. I mean, we're expecting performance. We're expecting work that we can use. And so, assuming you have an internship like that, it has to shape your thoughts about what you're doing in this program. What do I need to pay attention to? So I would strongly encourage you to take advantage of that. That's why, looking back on it today, being able to work for a couple of years before I went into the program was a critical thing for me, and I'm happy that it turned out that way, even though I obviously, given my love for Ole Miss, would love to say my MBA was from Ole Miss, and I'm proud of my MBA from the University of Memphis as well, but that 2 years was a critical issue. So again, your personal brand's very important. Learn how to develop that, learn how to manage it. From my perspective, make sure you leave here with a good set of financial skills. No matter what you're going to do, I don't care what it is, you're going to need those. And then learn how to play well with others. And with that...
I asked the head of my MBA school one time, I said, really, how many financial classes does it take to graduate from here? Because we had already had 9. And he looked at me and said, as many as it takes in your case, So I have darn good advice.
Would you agree with me that every key battle you fight ends up having some type of...
It absolutely does. It has a financial impact. Now, that doesn't always win the day, but your ability to sit in that conversation and go toe-to-toe, again, back to Mike's point, you may not know how to trade bonds, you may not know what derivatives are, But if you can't do the basic things and tell somebody why this is a good deal for your firm and why this investment should be made, you're really going to have a tough way to go. So I would say that's outstanding advice. I think my grade point may have been lower than Mike's that first semester. You know,
Can you beat .86?
oh no, I can't. As a matter of
I
fact,
think so.
mine was a
Didn't think
1.56,
so.
I think, something like that. I went
Didn't
home and I
think so.
told my dad, I gave him, he got my grade card and he said, I don't think you're applying yourself. And I said, oh yeah, I'm having a nice time.
You know, I tell you
That
one
had
quick,
to change, I'm telling
one
you.
quick funny story. I had physics, which I'm not cut out for physics either, I'll just tell you. But
I dropped that.
I'd really worked hard. I had a tutor in organic chemistry, I had a tutor in physics. I was getting by in English literature and botany. But organic was the thing that took me under. But the last day of that semester, I had really studied hard for this physics exam. I walked in, you know, I got my test, I sat down and looked at it, and I went, there's no way. And so I walked to the front of the class, and the professor was there. I don't remember his name, and I handed it to him, and I said, I'm sorry. I said, but I'm wasting your time. And he said, you do realize that we're past the drop-ad date. I said, do you really think it matters? And immediately, I went left and grabbed the phone, and I called my mother. I'll never forget that. I called my mother, and I said, I need to let you know what's coming. And to her credit, she actually did know that I was trying real hard. I wasn't cut out for that. So I give the university great credit for having a tremendous impact on my career. Not that there's anything wrong with pharmacy, but I'm happy that they end up pushing me the way they did. So
Hey,
with
one
that,
other thing,
Go ahead.
let me just say one final thing too. In your calculus, when you're thinking about jobs, don't be afraid to take the hardest one in an area that's the most screwed up. Because my calculus has always been, hey, look, it can't get any worse. You know, if I'm running it, it's got to get better. And so, you know, don't be afraid to step out and take risks. That's part of the DNA of our company is they're measured risk, but, you know, risk is directly sometimes correlated to the reward that you can achieve with it. So in your career, don't be afraid of that. Take calculated risk. Q&A.
any questions?
I got one. This isn't for me, this is for them. But how do you maintain your culture given the size of the organization you are? We're a small organization and pride ourselves on culture. We find challenges all the time. We're 1,000 the size of business.
Well, I'll start out, and Mike can finish up. But if you look at our strategic priorities, culture's on that list. A lot of people, a lot of organizations, if you looked at the strategic priorities, you wouldn't see culture on the list. People would say, take that for granted. The problem with culture is you can't take it for granted. You have to intentionally manage it just like you do everything else. And we have a language built around culture and the expectations of people built around culture. Now, we have to reinvest in that. We have to reinforce that. We call, one of the things we say is the shadow of the leader. Now, what's the shadow of the leader that's cast when it comes to setting the tone for the culture? So we say that each team member is responsible for contributing to a positive FedEx spirit. They have to act accountably to maintain that culture. They have to recognize that each team member is a vital link in the chain of success and also recognize how big of a team they play on. Because it's very easy to say, well, how does this affect me? Well, that's important how it affects you, but it's also important to understand how it affects the team, going
Everybody
back
else.
to that issue of playing well with others. And then you also have to be responsible for your own personal growth and well-being. And that's two things. One is that's your career development. And just a moment of that on that is one of the big problems that you run into in any organization is the whole concept of career development. People think that I'm going to go into my manager and say, I'd like my career plan, please. Well,
Bless you.
you have accountability for your career plan. You need to work with your manager, identify relative strengths and weaknesses, and then you have accountability for that plan. Your manager has a responsibility to work with you on that, but you own that plan. Your manager doesn't own that plan. And the other is well-being, and that's coming, making sure that you take care of yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, those types of things so that you are in a position to contribute to a positive FedEx spirit. So we have a program around that, and it's not the same in every one of our operating companies. I mean, we all intentionally manage the culture. We use different tools to do it, but we have a common set of language, a common set of tools. I'll give you one example. Listening circles is a big thing. I do a listening circle every month where I'll take 10 team members at different levels of the organization. And the whole purpose of the meeting is exactly what it says, listening. And they know that whatever they want to say, I will never go back to their direct, I will talk to the management team about it, but I will never attribute one comment to an individual. And it creates an environment of openness and trust, which is a foundation to any culture. So, how you manage it, there are lots of ways to do that. But if you don't intentionally manage it, it'll get away from you, and you won't know it got away from you until it's too late. So that's been the main thing for us. And I will tell you, that was a painful lesson that I learned personally, because I was more focused on the other strategic elements of the plan at one point, and I forgot about the culture in my leadership capacity, and took about 2 years to get it back on track. And that's still a journey that we're on, but it's a big deal. And then
I would add a couple of things. I think one of the most important practices that any manager can do is hire the right people. And frankly, if you get the right people in, it's easier to shape that culture. Mike's right, you also have to invest in the culture. And then in a leadership role, people, you'll find this over the course of your life, and you come back to me after you guys are running some big, find me later and after you've run some big organizations. But people really don't care what you know until they know you care. And frankly, I think that's probably one of the more important things. Not everybody's gifted with finding out, what makes people tick, what drives them, what's important to them. But in your role as teammate, in your role as leader, it's one of the things that I would encourage you to work on, is to find out what drives people, because at the end of the day, in those difficult moments, you need to know who you're playing with, what motivates them, and how you can help them. And then I think we also evaluate. If we don't have people that are invested in the culture and that are managing the culture appropriately, then they have to go. The culture can't go. So in our organization, every manager gets evaluated by their teammates on the critical dimensions of the job, and there are a lot of those in there that include cultural aspects. Does my manager treat me with respect, with dignity? Does he tell me when I'm doing a good job? Do I want to go somewhere else to work? There are key indicators that come out of those measurements, and every manager knows once a year. And then they're tasked with meeting with those groups of people, taking it upon themselves to improve their work group culture. So it's active management, investment in it, hiring the right people, and then making sure that you are very intentional in eliminating those that don't fit your culture.
I'll give you one example of the culture at work that I think probably best describes it. And let me just say this, FedEx is far from perfect in terms of managing the culture. I mean, it's a journey, it never stops, and you're going to make mistakes and all those kinds of things. But coming out of the economic downturn of 2008, FedEx was not unlike any other company where you found yourself that you had more people than you needed to do the job given the downturn in the business. And so we had to make the tough decision of having a reduction in force. And there were tons of those. You pick up the Wall Street Journal every day, you'd see this company's cutting 5,000 people, this company's cutting 10,000 people. And there's a model for doing that. And I'll never forget, I read the story about one computer company that's located in Texas, and they called everybody to a hotel, didn't tell them why they were coming. They thought they were coming to some kind of celebration, and they left with their pink slip.
I was actually in Houston, Texas, and this was many years ago, and one airline who shall remain nameless. They're out of business at this point in time, but they actually rang the fire alarm, and everybody exited the building, and they locked the doors and had security clean the desk.
Yeah, those are two examples of how not to do it. But the PSP culture is, as I said, is people have to be your first consideration. So we had consultants in to help us, and of course every consultant said, go through systematically, say this one's gone, this one's gone, this one's gone, this one's gone, this one's gone. And I got to tell you, it would have been a whole lot easier to do it that way. But we made the decision, because of the people first philosophy, to take a different route. We instituted a voluntary buyout program. The problem with a voluntary buyout program is A, you have no idea whether you're going to get the number that you really need, but B, you're going to lose people you really don't want to lose. You're going to lose people with experience, leadership, that find the financial offer attractive. They're at a point in life where they can pursue other interests. They know their skills are marketable to another company, and so there's a risk that they're going to leave. But we said that we felt that was much more consistent with the culture than simply calling people in and saying, sorry, there's no more opportunity for you. And the challenge with that is it's a lot more expensive to do it that way. But having said all that, learning from a lot of other experiences, we felt that that was much more consistent with the people philosophy. And our objective in that, and we weren't perfect by any stretch of imagination here, but our objective was that the people that were leaving were just as happy as the people that were staying. And I think in large part we met that objective. So that's an example of how you manage culture, what the shadow of the leadership, and how you intentionally think about that from what we call a PSP philosophy. Yes, sir.
Generally speaking, for FedEx, how does the process of assessing whether the new entrant's culture matches the company culture go during the selection process?
Well, a couple of things. I'll give a thought on that. I mean, first of all, I mean, I talked about a couple of things that are important, you know, playing well with others. Our internship program is very important to us. We have about 300 applicants for every internship that is offered. And then of that, we hire about 50% of the interns. The advantage of that is it's a great test drive for you as an intern. You get to see how the company operates. You get to hear about the things we're talking about. You get to see if they're real, and you get to see if it's a place you want to spend a lot of time. The advantage for us is we get to do exactly the same thing. So, and the reason we put people in teams is to do, again, to test some of those things that we feel are important. So if you come into FedEx, you know, you come in and make a contribution, demonstrate that you've got those team skills that we're talking about. You have a willingness to take on challenging assignments. You got a great chance of coming out of that. So, you know, that's been a model that's really, really worked well for us. And so there are a lot of companies now, I should add, that are offering internships in a postgraduate world. Don't be afraid of those. I was over out of the country here probably a month ago, and I met this nice woman, young woman from Florida State, and I asked her, she was working behind the counter of a very nice hotel, and I said, tell me about what you're doing. She said, I'm an intern. I said, well, you in school? She said, no, I graduated. And I said, well, tell me about that. She said, well, this company has a postgraduate internship. I think I want to be a part of this company, but I'm not sure. And so she was working in Scotland and was delightful and was going to be there 3 months. And she said, if I don't like it, I'm just going to go look for another opportunity. But it was a great opportunity. And not surprisingly, she was expecting an offer. And if she got it, she would have accepted it. So again, that opportunity for you to test drive a company, for that company to test drive you, what do you give up in that? You give up some compensation for a short period of time, maybe 3 months. But think of the benefit of being able to say, gee, this is a good fit for me, or maybe this is not so good of a fit for me. So don't be afraid of those postgraduate intern opportunities, especially given the job market that it is today.
And if you were asking a question about the original interview or application processes, I mean, all of our interviews are designed with those kind of questions in mind so that we determine who's really a team player, who's a customer-focused employee. Because one of the things we haven't really talked a lot about here today is that, you know, we pride ourselves on giving a perfect customer experience every time. And we don't meet that mark. But long ago did we stop measuring customer service and we started measuring customer experience. And you got to hire people that love serving customers. And that's a big thing in our world because there's so many transactions that happen every day. Our managers are trained on those kind of interviewing skills. We use panels so you get, you know, 2 or 3 people that are looking at it. And back to the point that Mike made earlier about your personal brand. You know, the paperwork that you submit the first time, the first impression that you make sticks with people. And so you've got to manage those things very aggressively.
You wouldn't believe the resumes that we see. You go, this is somebody that has an MBA? That's your first opportunity to make an impression. And let me just say, for those of you that have an interest in marketing or whatever, I mean, challenge yourself on the way you think. Think outside in, not inside out. I was actually telling our chairman this the other day because we were debating a certain value proposition that we were considering, and I said, you know, let me tell you the problem with this. The problem with this is we're designing this to fit the needs of the company and not the needs of the customer. If we design, I've never been associated with anything that was designed to take to the marketplace that fit the needs of the company that didn't fail in the marketplace, or at least wasn't as successful as it could have been. If you start thinking about what does the customer expect here, and then work back from there. Now, you may not be able to meet every one of those. I mean, you know, everybody wants a Mercedes at the price of a Volkswagen. You can't do that. But if you start looking at what the customer wants and work back from there, and then say, okay, how are we going to meet the needs of the customer, and challenge the organization that way, as opposed to challenging the customer to learn how to do business the way the company wants to do, you will be far more successful. So,
No question.
we got about
Yes.
5 minutes left here.
Having been on the interviewee side before, now on the corporate side, I feel like a lot of the MBA students probably would benefit from hearing from each of you, what's your favorite interview question?
My favorite interview question really deals with character questions, which is where I always want to go back to the foxhole thing. I want to know who I'm working with. So what I typically ask them is, what are your life's priorities? And that's usually my favorite question. And it's not one that you can really prep for. You sort of got to know that one. So it just immediately stimulates in me an assessment of what's important to this person.
Mike,
How to figure out which boxes have illegal drugs.
well, actually,
Well,
and
Yes.
truth be known, we spend a ton of time working with the authorities on that, the drug enforcement authorities on that. And if you go out to the Memphis hub tonight or any hub, you will see drug sniffing dogs out there. We work with the FBI and other organizations to, many of the packages that go through our system go through with the purpose of catching the people on the other end. And I will tell you, there are lots of packages that we wish weren't in our system. As a common carrier, we do not have the right to refuse a package.
No.
And so, you know, probably best that I let that sit. But you, no, I understand where you're going. I know the question. I know where it's. I know the basis of the question. And needless to say, we feel very strongly about our position. I will say this. The one thing, getting back to culture and integrity, for those of you who don't know, FedEx was hit with a subpoena by the Justice Department about carrying illegal prescription drugs. and they hit us at another one for laundering of money. Now, the basis of laundering of money is the fact that we offered COD service. I should point out, we do about 15,000 COD packages every day. Never said anything about that before, but as a common carrier, we don't have the right to say we're not going to pick up a package. And in today's world, there are a lot of people that will settle those things and move on. The one thing I'll say is, when we think we're right and when we haven't done anything wrong, we're not about to say we've done something wrong.
We'll fight.
And so I'll just leave it at that, and we'll see how all this transpires. But
Just to tell you the links we go to, you guys would have no idea. I just built a hub in Cologne, Germany a couple of years ago. And we had to build a track for the dogs, okay, to test certain packages. And we had to have that track built to the dog handler specifications. Now, I mean, we do things like that. So to say that we're diligent in knowing what's in our system, we can't know everything, but we to the maximum extent possible cooperate with all the authorities and to build our systems so that they're as secure as they possibly can be.
so we'll see how that plays out.
Yep.
Anything? Oh, I didn't answer your question. Well, Mike hit on a big thing from my perspective is you can't miss on character. I mean, you can't miss on that. Somebody that's, if you miss on character, everything else kind of falls apart. But I'll tell you a question that surprised, I don't do a lot of interviewing anymore, so I'll tell you that on the front end. But I'll tell you a question that always amazes me is, why do you want this job? And the silence, because people go, oh, I didn't think about that. And then you follow up, well, why do you think you're the best candidate for the job? I didn't think about that one. So if you don't know why you want the job and why you're the best candidate for the job, there's a real good chance you're not going to get the job. So, those are just, pretty basic things. But again, and then the other thing I would say is a question that would put somebody outside their comfort zone. In other words, if I know a candidate doesn't have experience, I want to ask them about their experience in a certain area that they don't have experience, because the failure point always is, well, I don't have any experience in that area. The right answer is, well, I don't have any direct experience in that area, but let me tell you about some examples of similar situations where I've been able to exhibit my skills in leadership. So what are the transferable skills that you have that can apply to those situations? Don't just say, I don't have any experience in that area. If somebody asks you about leadership, you say, well, I've not been in a leadership capacity in the professional world, but let me tell you about when I was named captain of the football team and how I exhibited leadership skills to motivate this team. What that tells people is this is somebody that has experience, thinks on their feet, can demonstrate skills, can sell themselves, confidence in their personal brand. Those are the things that you got to get good at. And that interviewing experience is critical, because if you sit there and just say, I don't have any experience in that area, you're done.
Yeah. Before we, I guess we're getting ready to wrap it up pretty soon, but I would be really remiss if I didn't tell this group, just based on my experiences, the other thing that I didn't say when we're talking about what would you do differently, I think if I were sitting in your shoes, I would really think about a lot larger world, and I would focus in on what's going on globally. And I would focus on creating diversity and in my teams, because I think in your age you have such an ability with the way the world works and the digitization and the closeness in communications and the way the world is interconnected to a far greater extent than ever before, to manage things on a global basis and to see things from a global perspective. And that's what I've had the privilege of doing with this company since 1991. And it's been one of the greatest learning experiences of my life. So to the extent that you can avail yourselves to those opportunities to be in different cultures, to be in different countries, and to see the way business works all around the world, I think it just makes you a much more capable executive in your future.
Ken, it's right at 2 o'clock. We can talk all day long, but,
Up to you, man.
Thank you very much, guys.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.